In the last episode, I mentioned that I do not save money in a savings account, but rather I take all my money that is not in my non-negotiable expense money and I invest it. So I invest the money that I set aside for savings as well as the money that I set aside for investments. I never understood the quote, it's better for you to try and fail than for you to never try at all until I started investing in the stock market. And as someone who invests both her savings and investment money, it was a very big risk I had to take. So, welcome to today's talk on why I chose to invest my savings rather than keep it in a savings account. When I first started earning money, I was introduced to the 50-30-20 method of splitting your salary. 50% of your salary is for your non-negotiable expenses, which includes your rent, your water bill, your power bill, your groceries, your transportation, the non-negotiables that repeat themselves every single month. 50% of your salary goes into it. 30% was for savings, which means you have to set aside money to put in the savings account in case of an emergency. And then 20% was for investing either in the stock market or in real estate or in bonds, whatever it may be. It was for investing, which is basically to help you grow another source of income in the long run. I tried the 50-30-20 method. I did try it. And I quickly came to the realization that it just didn't work out for me, mainly because I tend to take my 30% and cut a very huge chunk out of it and split it into my non-negotiable expenses and my investments. So basically, I did not have a savings. And when I did have a savings, I just tend to spend it in either of these other categories. So one day I woke up, I sat myself down, and I stopped using the 50-30-20 method. Rather, I changed it to 60-40. So 60% of my salary went into my non-negotiables, which included subscriptions, fund money for whatever was left over after I paid my rent and bills, and then 40% was for investments. A lot of people will disagree with me on this division. However, it is my money, it's my business, and it is a method that honestly works for me. And I will tell you why. Now, you may ask, am I not risking more by not having a savings and just splitting my income into 60-40, which is expenses and investments? The answer is probably yes, but for me, it is a no. This is simply because I tend to not save money when I did have a savings. When I saved a particular percent of my salary, and back then I think I saved 20% just to test the waters. For the first 2 months, I saved 20%, if not the 30. And even as I saved the 20%, I still happened to cut out of the 20% and put it in investments or in expenses. I just kept on dividing the savings money into other fractions until eventually it was finished. And by the third month, I told myself this just isn't working. We are going to split into two, expenses and investments. I see it as lesser risk because my money is still making more money and I do not have to compromise on the quality of saving money. Mind you, I do not touch my stocks. My stocks are long term investments, which I also interpret as long term savings because as long as they are there, nobody's stealing them from an account and they will always be in my name. So to me, it is not a risk. I chose stocks as my investment format because it is one of the easiest investment formats that exists. Real estate is also a form of investment. However, it is easier for you to liquefy your stocks than for you to liquefy your real estate. When I talk about liquidation, I'm simply talking about how easy it is for you to get your money if you need it in case of an emergency. And it is way easier to sell a stock than it is to sell a house or a piece of land. So whenever I need my money, I can simply sell my stock and the money will get to me within 24 hours, rather than a piece of land where I have to look for a buyer, negotiate a price, haggle, hustle, and then finally he starts, or he pays me, or in some cases he starts a payment plan of maybe this amount of money a month, or this amount of money now and this amount of money later. So it is a lot easier to liquefy stocks, and it's a lot easier to buy stocks than it is to buy a piece of land or a piece of real estate, because real estate is expensive. Okay, it is very expensive. Stocks are cheaper. You can find a stock of 50 naira, $1. So I chose stocks because they're easy, they're convenient, they're readily available in a lot of cases, and real estate just isn't. Are there other forms of investment? Sure, we have the forex market, we have crypto. I like to do these things by myself, and so far, the stock market is what I truly understand, as well as the real estate market. I know of crypto, I just haven't invested in crypto, and neither have I invested in the forex market. So stocks are my go-to choice of investments. In the case of an emergency, or in an emergency case, because the main reason why we save money is for emergencies. The goal of you having a savings is to build an emergency fund for about 6 months or a year, depending on you, for when something happens, maybe your job goes out or your company goes into bankruptcy, you have something to live and be sustained on until you get a new job, or you're moving across a city or something. Your car breaks down and you need to buy a new one or fix it. That is why we have savings. As someone that does not have a savings, in cases of emergencies, as I mentioned earlier, I can simply just liquefy my stocks and get the money out. You might ask, why would I do that if my stocks are long term investments? And my answer to you is saving stocks. There are some stocks, or there are certain stocks that I buy that I consider saving stocks. These particular stocks are stocks that I put my savings money into separately from my investment money. So I invest both my savings and investment as one, but there are certain stocks I buy that I term savings. These are stocks that I will readily sell in the case of an emergency, over the other stocks that I view as non-sell stocks. Are they both long-term stocks? Yes, they are. But there are certain stocks that I can sell if an emergency comes up, because that is why I am keeping this money, for it to grow and bail me out in the case of an emergency. Or there are certain stocks that I will not sell unless my saving stock is not enough. Then in that case, I can take money out of my investment stock and then use it for my emergency. The major purpose of you saving and making investments is for you to have money for future purposes. So if I say that I will never spend the money that my stocks pay me, perhaps my dividends or the profits I have made, then why am I keeping stocks? It doesn't make any sense. You may have heard of the term HISA, which means a high interest savings account. And these are accounts that are specifically created for saving money. And they are very popular. And yes, I have heard of them and I have tried using one. I did not enjoy the experience, which is what further prompted me to invest my savings. HISAs exist in many forms. Some have different operational ways. Some lock your money for a specific period of time. Some you can keep depositing and it will keep accruing interest. There are different interest rates depending on what plan you choose or what type of account you choose, or the company that you use to save the money. For example, here in Nigeria, we have this HISA account called PiggyVest, and then there's another one called Carrywise. These are two high interest savings accounts. They both give money on interest per year, but their interest rates are very different. So these are things that you consider when you want to open your high interest savings accounts or HISAs. I did try PiggyVest and it wasn't bad, or it wasn't a bad experience per se, but the interface isn't the most easy to use, and I just did not enjoy the experience. And also, if you want to break out your money from the bank, you pay a certain fee. I understand that this fee is meant to encourage you to keep your money for the whole per annum or for the whole duration that is meant to sit and accrue interest, but it just didn't sit right with me. I mean, my money, my business, right? So, all this and more, I honestly just do not enjoy using high interest savings accounts. Therefore, I rather just invest my money into the stock market where I can see it growing, moving, interesting on its own over time, and then I take it out in case of emergencies. Will I have a savings in the future? I do not know. The future isn't now, it's tomorrow. So tomorrow I could wake up and try saving again. And another thing that I learned about saving is that when you hit your savings mark, let's say your aim is to save for 6 months worth of your expenses or 6 months of your salary. Now, when you hit that mark, what do you do with the money? You just let it sit down. I once saw this creator that whenever she hit her mark or surpassed her mark of her savings account, she took out money to reduce the amount to perhaps 2 months of savings so that she could regrow account and keep up the habits and the dedication. I think that's a beautiful thing. And then she took the money and invested it into the market, the stock market. So in my case, I think I'm doing the best of both worlds, to be very honest. So it's a question for you today. When you hit your savings mark, what do you do with the money? It's something you should think about when you do hit your mark. If you haven't hit it yet, what are you going to do? Are you just going to keep adding to it, or are you going to, take it out, make a different investment, see how that works, and then compare your two options? I honestly like to think of my money as my business. I listen to financial advice, of course I do. I read finance books, yes. But at the end of the day, it is my money and I get to decide what happens to it. And I get to bear the consequences of what happens to it. Therefore, I make it my business. If a certain philosophy or a certain way isn't working for me, I take a pause and I re strategize and I try a different way. And this way honestly works for me. I invest my savings because it works for me. Your method works for you. That is why you use it. My method works for me, which is why I use it. So I would want to ask, would you ever think of investing your savings, or do you simply think that it should remain in an account and accrued interest over time, or you rather put it into an investment fund or the stock market and see it grow? That's something I'd like to know. Is it something that you do? We are all different people, so we all have different ways of doing it. And I'm not saying my method is the best, but it is something that I do, and it is something that I will continue to do. And on this note, I will see you next time on the Tiny Chair Talk.